Welcome back to We Are the Threat. This episode is part of our mini-series Survival the Systems, where we break down the systems in America that weren't built for us, but that we're forced to navigate every day. So far we talked about housing, and then we talked about education. Today's topic is about healthcare, which is one of the most dangerous systems for Black and Brown communities, not because we don't care about our health, but because this system has repeatedly showed us that our lives are negotiable. So this episode might take longer than others because this history goes deep, like deep, deep. It is painful and it's still very much alive. So just a little trigger warning. We will be discussing topics of medical racism, reproductive violence, experimentation, and death. So I do want to apologize to the Black and Brown people who this might have re-traumatized them, or this might bring up stuff from maybe their family history. I'm not apologizing to people who this might be offensive to because all this stuff has been fact checked. I will tell you this. I do research on this before I um host. So all this stuff has been fact checked. You can look this stuff up yourself, but this is a real thing, a real issue that Black and Brown people go through in America. Um, so let's start with the hard truth. The healthcare system in America is not neutral, and it never has been. From the beginning of time, medicine was built on who was considered human enough to receive care and who was considered important or expandable. Um, Oftentimes, Black people are not seen as patients, we're seen as test subjects. And even today, the outcome even shows it. Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women, regardless of income and education. And I would like to say that these pregnancy deaths were completely preventable. Black patients are less likely to receive pain medication. Black symptoms are more likely to be dismissed, and our pain is more likely to be ignored, which I'll be talking to this all throughout today's episode. Um, and this isn't just about genetics, which is what they love to say. It's about the belief of Black and Brown. So let's talk about medical myths that kill us. So one of the most dangerous parts about the healthcare system is that these myths still exist, and these myths are often taught and passed down and acted on. So let me know if y'all ever heard these. Um, Black people have thicker skin than white people. We feel less pain. Our bodies are stronger, and we don't need the same care as white people. That, oh, we exaggerate the symptoms. It's not as bad as as we're saying. Or that we're seeking drugs. That's why we're going to the doctor instead of actually being in pain or hurting. Well, if I know a lot of y'all have heard it, these beliefs are false and they're deadly. These come directly from slavery era medicine, where enslaved people were experimented on without anesthesia because doctors believed that we did not feel pain the same way. And those ideas were never disappeared. They just put on a white coat. And that's sad, and that's the truth. Um, you don't believe me? Well, let's talk about the Tuskegee syphilis study. Now, I don't know if people have heard about this, but this is one of the staple why the Black community does not trust the medical system. So what is this study? From 1932 to 1972, the US government, yes, our US government studied hundreds of Black men with syphilis in Alabama without their informed consent. Now, this is key. This is really key. Without their consent. They were told they were receiving treatment for syphilis. They were not. Even after penicillin became the standard cure, it was withheld. So many black men died, a lot of wives were infected, and children were born with syphilis. And people's like, that happened so long ago. It ended in 1972. 1972. That is some of y'all's parents' age. Like, and then people wonder why we don't trust doctors. This is one of the reasons why. The next thing, if that's not enough for you, the eugenics movement and the unfit population. So, like I said, this wasn't the Tuskegee experience wasn't an isolated incident. In the early 1900s, the United States embraced the eugenics movement. So the idea that society should be improved by controlling who could reproduce. So people were either labeled fit or unfit. Now guess who was fit? Just take a guess. If you said white, wealthy, and educated, you're correct. And so who was unfit? If you said black, indigenous, immigrants, disabled, and poor, you are absolutely correct. And so birth control framed, was not always framed as a right. Oftentimes it was framed as a weapon. And so it was considered a way to reduce the birth rates of people considered undesirable. And so the black and brown community was targeted under the field that um, racial suicide. So what racial suicide is like the idea that the white population would be outnumbered if marginalized group continue to reproduce. And so health care became a tool of population control. What's wild is now we're in 2025, and if you look at how many like people we have, like people of color versus white people, we do outnumber them. And I feel like that's an issue is that we often become the marginalized or one of the minorities. In reality, we are the majority. If you look at how many like people we have, like yes, we have to combine races, but like if even if we, because like oftentimes people consider Asian and stuff as um white when they're not white. Um, but if you look at it, you can see we outnumber them. Um, and so if there's another experiment, with Margaret Sanger, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, I think it is Sanger, and the Negro Project. So this is, I would like to say, one of the most complicated figures in the reproductive healthcare system history. So Margaret Sanger became the founder of Planned Parenthood. So she believed in birth control access, but she also used eugenist language to gain support from white political and medical leaders. So this happened. So in 1939, she launched the Negro Project. And so this aimed to increase birth control access in the Black communities. And so she partnered with Black leaders like Webb, Du Bois, but the project was deeply entangled with eugenic ideology, um, um, ideologically. Sorry, um, so whether or not it was intentional or not, it reinforced the idea that Black, um, the reproduction of Black people was a problem to be managed. And so, like, because of this history, Planned Parenthood has publicly disowned her legacy and removed her name from a lot of the facility. But sadly, the damage was already done. So it didn't just stop at this influence. It did move into like violent. And if y'all know the Supreme Court ruling Buck versus Bell that forced sterilization was constitutional, not unconstitutional. It was constitutional. And so from the 1920s to the 1970s, I want to say I think it was like 60,000 and 70,000 people in the United States were forcefully sterilized. Women of color were disproportionately targeted. And so this include Black women, Latina women, and Indigenous women. And so in 1970s, I think it was estimated around like 25% of Indigenous women of childbearing age were sterilized by the Indian Health Service, oftentimes without informed consent. And so some some were told that it was reversible. Some were pressured while in labor. So you gotta think, you're in labor, you're about to give birth. I don't know what that feels like, but I can only imagine, like from what people have told me. And I know you're exhausted, you're tired, and they're trying to pressure you. And that's the worst part. Some people weren't even told at all that this was happening. And so this is not healthcare. This is a state-sponsored trauma. And it happened for so many years, about 50 years. And some people say, oh, at the age of 50, you old. So, but like it happened for 50 years. So many people were affected by this. So when people ask, why don't the black and brown community go to the doctor? Let's be completely clear and honest. It's not ignorance. It's not them being scared for no reason. It is experience, whether it's them that happened to them personally, or their ancestors, or their grandparents. You know, we avoid doctors because we've been dismissed, we've been talked over, we've often been misdiagnosed, we've been accused of exaggeration, we've been experimented on, and we've been harmed. You know, and some of us were taught by our parents and our grandparents to be cautious because they lived throughout this history. And then, like, even today, this insurance gap, the high cost, the medical debt, the language barrier, which I will say the language barrier has gotten better. Like I have seen a lot where they have translation services. When I was in the hospital, I did see they have this like tablet thing, and they were navigating through that. But even then, it was hard to try to find someone in the language that they wanted. Um, and then like the lack of culturally competent providers and doctors, all that makes healthcare feel unsafe instead of supportive. So then you wonder why they are, you wonder why like a lot of people in the Black and brown community, often when they do go, they wait until the worst possible moment to go to the hospital. Like the symptoms might be mild, and they're like, "Oh, I could take Benadryl," or "Oh, I could take ibuprofen," "Oh, I could take Tylenol," and then the system gets worse, and then worse, and then worse, and then they have to go because, you know, something horrible happened and they can't ignore it anymore. But it's like if we felt more supportive and we had more doctors that actually advocated and actually listened to our concerns, I feel like more would go to the doctors. So these systems did not disappear. They actually evolved. So there was a study that showed that Black patients are less likely to receive life-saving interventions. They are more likely to die from preventable illnesses. They're more likely to have symptoms minimized. Black women's pain during childbirth is still dismissed. Black mental health concerns are still criticized instead of being treated. And Black bodies are still seen as a problem instead of being seen as a patient. And this is not just a coincidence. This is just a continuation of history. So, why are we talking about this? Why is this so important? Because oftentimes people's like, well, that happened so long ago, or oh, that, you know, you're just making all this stuff up, or oh, it's all in your head. And it's like, no, people have experienced this, including me. I've been misdiagnosed. I've been told that I just wanted drugs. And let me tell you, am the biggest person who, if I don't have to take drugs, I won't. If I could take a natural remedy, I will. But it didn't just happen to me. It happened to my mom. It happened to my dad. Um, my they told my mom she wasn't supposed to have kids. She had a less than 1% chance to have kids. And she had three of us. She had two twins and then my younger sister. Um, I had a doctor when I was born pull on my leg because I came out a breech baby, which means I came out feet first. Um, and I ended up having to get surgery years later when I was because my growth plate was down. My growth plate wasn't what it was supposed to be in my hip. And so I was like walking with a limp or pigeon-toed because of that problem. Um, so, I know my dad, he had medicine that was conflicting, and you know, he had to go to the emergency room because of it. My dad was drinking so much water and was still thirsty. I still remember that. That's something I still remember from him. Um, my grandma on my mom's side, rest in peace her, she passed away in 2018 due to malpractice of a doctor who overdosed her. And there's some of the things my grandma would say, like, so my grandma did not like hospitals, did not like doctors. My grandma would threaten my grandpa and like make him break her out of like hospitals and stuff because she did not want to be there. Which I understand. Um, but yeah, they did some messed up stuff to my grandma that she was supposed to live for at least 3 to 4 years, and it cut it down to 1 to 2 weeks. So that was hard, that happened in my life. I had myself been mixed diagnosed, so I was having extreme stomach issues. And yes, I do have diabetes. Um, but I was having extreme stomach issues, whereas I wasn't eating, I wasn't feeling good, and every time I go to the hospital, I kept being told, "There's nothing wrong with you. it's basically like then it was like it's in your head, or oh, just drink water, it'll go away. And it was getting to the point where in like 3 weeks I lost like 57 pounds. That's not normal, but it's because I wasn't eating. Because every time I would eat, my stomach would hurt. And it's not like I was eating unhealthy food. Like I wasn't. Like I was eating like salads. Um, I was eating healthy. I was cutting carbs down because my diabetes. And so it got to the point where I was laid up in bed, crawled up into like I was crawled into a ball and I was crying because it hurt. Like my stomach hurt so bad. And this is like months after the misdiagnosed, and my spouse was like, "You need to go to the hospital." My mom was like, "You need to go to the hospital." I was like, "I'm not going to the hospital because I keep going to the hospital and they keep telling me nothing's wrong with me. So I'm just racking up these bills and they're saying nothing's wrong with me. And I'm missing work because I'm taking these days off. Um, and then I'm staying hours in the ER and nothing's happening." And so I went like 2 to 3 more weeks in that excruciating pain. I was maybe sleeping 1 to 2 hours a night. And it would literally take me like I would have to crawl up in a ball and like force myself to go to sleep. And so I finally was at work and it was getting to the point where I could barely stand because I was in so much pain. And so I texted my spouse, I texted my mom, I was like, "Hey, I'm feeling super horrible. I'm gonna check myself into the hospital." Um, and I checked in. The first doctor, same thing. There's nothing wrong with you. Second doctor comes in. "Yeah, we don't see anything wrong with you." Um, it was a nurse. A nurse legit was like, actually listened to my problems, and she was like, "Hold on, I'm gonna order you this test." So she ordered me a test, and she took X-rays of my stomach, and she was like, I know what's going on. You have a blockage that's making you extremely constipated, and you are extreme." And so they had to like admit me in, and they were trying to like work on stuff because my blood sugar was also really, really low because I wasn't eating. So she was one of the first people that like actually listened to my concerns and issues and then was able to help me. I mean I don't like staying in hospitals, I will tell you that. Um but yeah, I had to stay there. I think for like I think a week I stayed there. And let me tell you, that helped me out so much. It did. It made me feel so much better. I was able to eat. My stomach wasn't hurting. Now, I didn't go like away overnight, but the pain did go down like overnight. Like it did go down. And so the nurse is like, "I don't understand how these doctors didn't catch it. Like, I don't get it." And I told her, I was like, if I'm being honest with you, they kept putting it off as my diabetes. And they would give me the saline stuff to get my with a little sugar in it to get my blood sugar go up and then send me home. And so she was like, "Yeah, you should write a report on that because that's wild." So that was that wasn't even a first instance. That's just one of my stories about what happened with me when That, when that happened, I was in the emergency room. Another time, this is when my blood sugar was high. Like, this is when I first found out I had diabetes. I I I went to the hospital and they're like, yeah, your blood sugar's too high. That's it. They wouldn't take my A1C. Oh, your blood sugar's high. We're gonna get it back down and send you home. And they kept doing that, but I kept feeling weak and all this stuff. And this is when I didn't know what diabetic ketoacidosis was. I didn't know what that was, because this is my first time having diabetes. And so I just realized like I was drinking water excessively. I didn't want to eat. Like it was a whole bunch of stuff that was going on. And so I finally went to a different hospital. No, was it a hospital? No, I think I went to urgent care. And they took my blood sugar. They did like an A1C test, and I guess they did a DKA test, which that's what diabetic ketoacidosis is. And it's like, yeah, you need to go to the emergency room. So uh they put me on a ambulance, sent me to the hospital. I didn't have to stay in the hospital for 2 weeks. And I like to say, like, all these people were not telling me what was going on, didn't tell me, anything. But you're fine, you're fine. We're just getting your blood sugar down. And it took a nurse to come and tell me. She was blunt and honest, and she said, I just want you to know because I don't think they're telling you that right now you are fighting for your life. Because right now your body's trying to shut down because your blood sugar is so high and they don't know what to do with the excessive sugar in your system. So your body is shutting down. And so this is why they keep waking you up, because they would wake you up every 2 to 3 hours, check your blood sugar, and then they would do a blood draw. They would draw your blood every 4 hours, and do an A1C test and do all these other tests, keto test and all this stuff. Um, and that's why I really realized this is real. This ain't no, oh, we're just getting your blood sugar. Like, no, I'm fighting for my life right now. And that's why she was like, this is why you were exhausted. This is why you were tired. Um, and that really messed up like me mentally because I'm like, I never wanted diabetes, but I sure wasn't, I was doing whatever I wanted to do. I was eating what I wanted to do and I'm not taking care of myself. Yes, I was depressed, but that's not a reason to not take care of myself because people love me, people care about me. Like my life is valuable. And lastly, that's, I mean, it is healthcare, but it's more on the mental side. Um, my mental health has often been ignored. Um, so going back to when my grandma passed away, I went to my college's, they call it CAP, so it's counseling, it's something. I know it's counseling something services. Um, and I went to them because I'm like, hey, like like my grandma just passed away. I'm not doing it. Okay, so it's counseling and psychological services. That's what it's called. Um, I'm like, my grandma just passed away. Right around the same time, I got stopped by a police officer with guns drawn, saying I fit the description of someone. If you go back to my earlier episode, I talk about that deeper. I'm not a criminal. I've never been arrested or anything. And so I went there because I'm like, I need a counseling and it's free for people who are students. My first person told me that the racism that I experienced was in my head and that the police officers were doing their job. The next person told me that my grandma passed away, I think it was like 4 months ago. Get over it. It happened a long time ago. You need to get over it to move on. And the third person told me that, um, oh, are you gonna want this run your life? You need to get over it. So I didn't go back there after the third time. I don't know why I went back there after the second time. Um, and and so I went to a doctor because I was just like, hey, I'm not feeling good. Like my depression's getting bad. Um, but I tried to go for a full physical because sometimes I don't realize that sometimes me being sad and stuff could also be me being sick. Um, and this doctor told me I'm not prescribing you drugs. So you better just figure it out. It's like I don't want drugs. So I ended up having to go, I think an hour and a half I had to drive to this is before COVID. So this we had you can go see it in person. And so I had to drive an hour and a half. Well, my best friend at the time drove me an hour and a half to go see them twice a week. And I'd pay him gas money and he would drive me because he saw me depressed, suicidal, like my GPA tanked. Like my GPA was not good. Um, and I was ready to leave. I was ready to go back home because I was going through all this. And this was my first black therapist. And so I'm already like having all these perceived notions on what a therapist is because of these last people who who I met were so bad. So we're sitting there and she's like, oh, so what's going on? Like what brought you in? After asking like obviously like the basic questions of who I am and stuff. I was like, oh, nothing. I think I'm fine. I'm just, and so I'm like giving her like basic answers. And she says, okay, so I'm gonna be honest with you. We can either sit here and act like you're fine. I'm still getting paid. Or we could come and see like why you came here, why you're here, and then we can work together and we can make you better. But it's your choice. And so at first I'm like, huh? And I said, did she just come at me? Cause what? So I said, all right, fine. I get up and I walk out. And I'm like, F this. I'm not about to sit here and take this from you and yada yada yada. And so then on the car ride home, I'm like venting, like this is a horrible experience I've had with these, and I don't know why she would say that. And my friend was like, "Do you want me to be honest with you, or do you want me to or do you want me to like play along?" I said, "Be honest with me." And he was like, "You need that therapist. All these other therapists made you feel like you were not heard, you were not seen. This one's challenging you to tell her what's going on." So I was like, eh. So I went back in my dorm and I started reflecting and I was like, you know what? You're right. So then that was senior confirmation, but then she sent me, I was like, hey, you have this amount of time before uh basically like your spot gets taken. And so I come back during my next scheduled visit and I'm like, hey, I'm sorry for walking out. Like, you're right. She's like, no, it's okay. She's like, honestly, like, like, that's, emotions are high. I understand. But I tell all my clients is that This is how we're going to grow. This is how you're going to grow. And so then we were able to have this conversation about what was going on. And she was my therapist for years before she retired. Um, and it helped me, you know, but I had to go through all these bad ones in order for um me to finally have a good one. So those are my experiences. I really want to hear about other people's experiences. So let me know what your experiences in the healthcare system, you know, because at the end of the day, the healthcare system doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't. Will healthcare, like, I look at like the universal healthcare systems and how, you know, they list, in the universal world, they're listening to Black patients, they're believing their pain, that they are asked for consent, that they are informed consent. It's not hidden, there's no hidden agenda or nothing. It is informed consent. I believe every doctor, provider needs to be culturally competent. They need to go through those trainings. They need to actually understand. And I'm sorry, if you're a racist or you're biased, you should not be hired. That's just my opinion. You should not be hired. There needs to be more affordable access. A lot of low income people get dismissed because they or not because they can't afford treatment, and that's including mental health. A lot of people can't afford counselors. That's not a part of their insurance plans, and so they're paying out of pocket. Speaking of mental health, that needs to be treated as health. It needs to be treated as something that people need instead of a luxury. Um, we need a reproductive anatomy without coercion. We need care without suspicion. We need treatment without punishment. And we need dignity without conditions. So, today we talked about surviving the healthcare system, a system that has repeatedly shown us who it values, but we're still here. We're still advocating. We still demand better because our mistreatment isn't irrational, it is learned. And our survival is not accidental. So thank you for listening to We Aren't a Threat and continuing this surviving the series. Sorry, I'm tongue twisted. So thank you for listening to We Aren't a Threat and continuing this surviving the system series with me. If this episode resonated with you, share it. Talk about your experience and name the harm. I am also looking for people who want to share their experiences with the systems, because healing cannot happen without truth. And remember that we aren't a threat. We are people who deserve to live.